Prabhupada, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya. Rajagacharya, also the Sispadesi, Bhaktivinoda Sanskrit Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se Gahal Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Sri Radha Krishna Kopa Kopida Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Gidi Govardhan ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadapdam ki jai. Gong Shamona Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Nandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Go Premanandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatadesha Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasudhi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 81, verse 21. Eti ta chintayananta prapto nija grahandikam Suryana Lindu Sankasaya Vimanai as Sarvatovratam. Iti, thus, tat, this, chintayan, thinking, anta, inwardly, prapta, arrived, nija, his, agriha, of the home, antikam, at the vicinity, surya, the sun, anula, fire, Indu, the moon, Sankasai, arrivaling, Vimanai, with celestial palaces, Sarvata, on all sides, Avritam, surrounded. Sukadeva Goswami continued, thinking thus to himself, Sudama firmly came to the place where his home stood, but that place was now crowded on all sides with towering celestial palaces rivaling the combined brilliance of the sun, fire, and the moon. There were splendorous courtyards and gardens, each filled with flocks of cooing birds and beautified by ponds in which Kumuda, Amboja, Kalara, and Utpala lotuses grew. Finely attired men and doe-eyed women stood in attendance. Sudama wondered, what is all this? Whose property is it? How has this all come about? Purport, Sridhar Swami gives a sequence of the Brahmana's thoughts. First, seeing a great unfamiliar effulgence, he thought, what is this? Then, noting the palaces, he asked himself, whose place is this? And recognizing it as his own, he wondered, How has it become so transformed? So, here we have the result of Sudama's going to see Krishna with the intent of asking him for something material because of the insistence of his wife, and at the same time being very ashamed to do so. And ultimately he had brought a little bit of rice with him, and the Lord was pleased by the attitude of Sudama Brahmana, and therefore he made some arrangement for him. Now this arrangement is described here. What happened, he got a big palace with gardens and ponds and lotuses and birds, etc., and many servants, which seems remarkable. How could the Lord manifest a whole palace with all sorts of living entities in it for his devotee? But nothing is remarkable for the Supreme Lord. We know that yogis, by their mystic power, can manifest objects, and of course some of them can manifest by their powers also palaces, etc. But the Lord, of course, is beyond the greatest of mystic yogis, and he can manifest anything by his will. So therefore it is not surprising that the Lord could do this. But why would he give something material to Sudama? The importance of life is to simply develop prema. So why should the Lord give benedictions like this, which are generally causes of bondage? So from the Lord's part, there is no misjudgment. He does not give things whimsically or things that create problems for devotees. And in fact, he's very eager to give everything. At the same time, Bhagavatam says that sometimes the Lord takes everything away if he thinks that that is advisable for the advancement of a devotee. But in other cases, the Lord gives anything to the devotee, even himself. So what to speak of giving material things? He gives all spiritual opulence, and he gives his own self, and he becomes a servant of the devotee. So that is even more remarkable. All right? So to give palaces or whatever, or kingdom, or nothing for the Supreme Lord. And we see this is the case with a person like Dhruva. He got the kingdom of his father. Later he got a kingdom which was superior to that of Lord Brahma, on Dhruvaloka. We see the Pandavas got to rule the whole earth. And of course we have all of the Manus and their descendants. By the pleasure of the Lord, they get to rule the whole of Bhumandala. So the Lord, in some cases, does this as a facility for the devotee, and because he likes to please the devotees. Similarly, we see he gives the Devatas Svargaloka. They are devotees also, and he gives them a place like that to enjoy or whatever. However, these devotees should not be overcome by material attraction. If the Lord feels this, he may not give. And in fact, he may take things away so a devotee can advance. The Lord can do either thing. He can give or he can take. The devotee accepts both situations. If the Lord gives, he accepts. And he uses it nicely. Not simply to enjoy, but to use in service of the Supreme Lord. And if the Lord doesn't give or takes away, the devotee also accepts that. as the mercy of the Lord. So the position of the devotee is to be completely detached. We see that in describing the Chittapragya in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, there Krishna talks about the person who's advanced in knowledge and understanding Atma. He's satisfied in the self. And when there are causes for joy, that is getting material benefit, he's not really joyful. And when he meets circumstances of hardship in the world, he does not lament. Why? Because he's detached from both things, understanding that material objects are simply material things to do with the material body, and therefore not really attached to them. So the devotee also has the same attitude. And it's a little different because the devotee is beyond realization of Atma. Once we get to realization of Atma, definitely we don't consider material objects to be very important at all. We become very detached from everything, either getting or losing those objects. So a devotee, on the other hand, not only is detached from material objects for his own use, he also is very enthusiastic to use everything to glorify the Lord. So therefore, as I said, a little different from the person in the material world. Definitely he's not materially excited by getting material things, or nor does he lament over losing things in the material world because of losing some opportunity for enjoyment. No, he doesn't do that. But on the other hand, when he gets something by the blessing of the Lord, he very joyfully accepts that. And he uses that on behalf of the Supreme Lord. He doesn't renounce it. Oh, this is Maya, I can't use it. The Atmajnani, if some things come from, then he says, oh, this is Maya, I can't touch this. So Rupa Goswami calls this Fogu Vairagya, false Vairagya, artificial Vairagya. So the devotee accepts it. But he does not accept it and enjoy it for himself. Because he's fixed in Atma already. He understands that these are only material objects, and material bodies enjoying them is all Maya and useless. But he accepts them on behalf of the Supreme Lord, and he can use those things in this world to glorify the Supreme Lord. So in other words, he accepts objects in this world, but with the provision that they don't cause bondage at all, because he's not using them for himself. He spontaneously uses everything for the Supreme Lord. So therefore, the devotee will accept material objects, but he uses them very nicely to glorify the Supreme Lord, or to serve the Supreme Lord. So then, in that case, if the devotee gets things, it's not a big problem. Sometimes they may be hesitant. We see Priyavrata was very reluctant to accept the rulership of the whole kingdom, and everybody had to persuade him, including Brahma. Finally, he accepted. We find Sukadeva Goswami didn't want to take birth because if he came out, then he would be attracted to material objects. But then the Lord promised, no, you won't be attracted to anything in this material world. Of course, the other trick of the Krishna was he became attracted to the pastimes of the Lord. So no problem for that. So the devotee will accept things and use them nicely for the Supreme Lord. So we see that Dhruva ruled the kingdom for thousands of years. And then he went to Dhruvaloka, and was presiding there in the company of the Supreme Lord. We find Bali Maharaj, after he surrendered, then he got to rule over Sutala Loka, hellish planet. But he also didn't object to that because he had the company of the Supreme Lord. Here, Sudama gets something. He actually didn't ask for it. He was very ashamed to ask for it. It was his wife's insistence that they get something for material sustenance from Krishna. But Sudama did not expect something like this. In fact, he didn't expect any material response from the Supreme Lord at all. He was simply satisfied to meet Krishna and see him. But the Supreme Lord was very attracted to the selfless dedication of Sudama. And therefore, he made this sort of arrangement. Not for him, not for Sudama, because he wasn't attracted to such things, but for the wife and the children, etc. They get some relief in this material world. And therefore, when this happened, then his wife wouldn't complain anymore. So, a good arrangement so Sudama could be peaceful. And we should never think that Sudama would become attracted materially to these things and use them selfishly for himself. No, how could he? He was so qualified that he could walk into Dwarka and see Krishna, even though he was so poverty-stricken. So highly qualified. And of course, previous to this, in the Gurukul, he got the personal association of Krishna. So he's a highly qualified jiva, highly qualified devotee. So such opulence is not a danger for him at all. Rather, by accepting this, he is accepting the mercy of the Supreme Lord. If the Supreme Lord didn't give, he would be completely happy. And if he gives this, also happy. And he appreciates, he understands how the Lord understands his material situation and is doing something for his wife and family. So in this way, he is greatly pleased because the Lord responded to him. And of course, his pleasure is not to get material things. His pleasure is to accept them, because it comes from the Supreme Lord. It is the Lord's affectionate response. So he should not refuse when the Lord shows affection. He should accept that affection. So he accepts all of this. And by accepting it, again, he glorifies the Supreme Lord. By accepting it, he shows that the Lord has a great understanding of his devotee. He's very affectionate towards his devotee. He cares for his devotee. And he's willing to do anything for his devotee. So therefore, the Sudama actually was able to appreciate the wonderful nature of the Supreme Lord, how he responds to his devotees. That's his main satisfaction, not to get a palace or whatever. Of course, we should also understand that though it looks like a material palace, actually it isn't. Just like Dwarka is not a material city with material opulence. It's described that Dwarka also had many wonderful palaces made out of diamonds and rubies and emeralds and sapphires, and it had elaborate gardens and groves of trees and ponds with birds and swans and all sorts of flowers blossoming everywhere. Very, very beautiful. But again, not material at all. Actually spiritual. So Krishna's residence is spiritual in Dwarka as it's spiritual in Vrindavan. And similarly, his great devotees like this also have spiritual opulence, not material opulence. We see in Vaikuntha, everybody has wonderful palaces. The Vishnudutas serve the Lord, but they also live in great opulence, great wealth. But it is all spiritual, not material. So there's no question that these objects could ever become objects of material attraction, because they're spiritual objects. They're manifested by the Chit Shakti of the Supreme Lord. And they are used by the devotee in service of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the result here is not a material result. It's not a material response at all. It's a spiritual response to the Supreme Lord to show his care and affection for his devotee. And Sudama's response is, again, not material, but rather he has a great respect for the affection that the Lord gives him, and he accepts everything as an act of gratitude to the Supreme Lord. So in this way, there's an exchange between Krishna and his devotee. So Krishna in this Leela here is playing the role of a Kshatriya, right, in Dwarka. And Sudama is in the role of a Brahmana. Generally, it's the Brahmanas who give blessings to the Kshatriyas. Like Narada Muni comes and he blesses, the palace or whatever, and the people of Dwarka. And Krishna honors him and worships him. Now here we see how Sudama was, even though he was a Brahmana, he was in quite a different type of position. Poverty-stricken, whatever. The Lord, in spite of himself being inferior in the sense that he is Kshatriya and Sudama is a Brahmana, he responds very nicely, as a Kshatriya should. The Kshatriya protects the Brahmanas and therefore nourishes them and gives them gifts. So this is exactly what Krishna did as a Kshatriya. With the other stories, like King Nriga, he was very, very enthusiastic to give charity to Brahmanas all the time. So he would give cows. Krishna in his pastimes also exhibits the role of a Kshatriya. Of course, he has no material consciousness or identity as a material Kshatriya who likes to give. Rather, he simply uses that position as a Kshatriya to exhibit his merciful nature to his devotees. So though he plays the role of a generous Kshatriya, we shouldn't think that's the main motive for him acting here. His main motive is because he sees the great devotion of Sudama, and he responds to that very nicely. So previously, Krishna and Sudama had been in the Gurukul. Sandipani Muni accepted Krishna and Balaram into the Gurukul to learn Vedas, all sorts of knowledge. And at that time, Sudama was there as a young Brahmana boy. So they developed a type of friendship, even though they came from different varnas. We see in Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, we have Madhumangal, who's a Brahmana, and he's in Sakyarasa with Krishna also, even though he's a different caste. So in the Gurukul also, there was a nice relationship of Sakya established. But then we see Krishna went to Dwarka and he became a very grand person. So one would expect that the situation would have changed. But Krishna was always remembering this nice friendship he had with Sudama. And he wasn't worried about his position as the king or whatever, and he has to assert his power, etc., and show off his power. Rather, he remembered that friendship with Sudama that he had previously. So in this way, we have an illustration of the Lord's affectionate relationship, and that overrides any other considerations. So that friendly relationship was most prominent. And even though their positions had changed in Dwarka, and Krishna was like a king and Sudama a poor brahmana. Krishna remembered their friendship. And he was not concerned about his present identity. Of course, we see that the others who saw this event when Krishna began to take his morsels of rice, they were rather shocked. Because, how can the king take this little dried up piece of rice from the Brahmana? And when he take it second time, and they were more shocked. But Krishna was interested in an affectionate relationship with his devotee, not his position as a king or anything else. So that is the overriding nature of the Supreme Lord, and particularly Krishna. He has an affectionate relationship, and he likes to express that very spontaneously with his devotees. So as a result, there was some suspense because Sudama was there, and then he left, and he thought, well, okay, I just seen the Lord, that's enough. But then he probably was thinking about his wife and how she would complain again. But then he was surprised because the Lord made arrangement for all of this so that when he got back, his wife was transformed, the house was transformed, everything was completely different. And this was the surprising response of the Supreme Lord to Sudama to fulfill all of his needs. So from here we see an illustration of how the Lord makes all arrangement for the devotee. And the devotee accepts this, and he appreciates the Lord's omniscient and compassionate nature. Huh? Yeah.
But Sudama was sanctioned opulences without his demand. Where Arjuna was in desperate measures given to get a piece of land west of him. And Sudama is in a higher relationship than Arjuna in terms of friendship.
A little bit different. Of course, the Pandavas and Arjuna were playing a crucial role to annihilate all of the miscreants, the adharmic people. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, you can become my instrument in this war and destroy all of the miscreants. So a lot of the events of the Mahabharata are arrangements of the Lord to ultimately annihilate the demons. And Arjuna and the Pandavas played a big role in that. So the battle of Kurukshetra was there to finally cause the annihilation of the demonic elements. And after that, the Pandavas could rule. So after the battle, then the Pandavas got that reward. They ruled the whole kingdom for many years, very opulently also. But it took a long time to do that. But they were, we can say, instruments of Krishna. And they were also playing the role of Kshatriya. They had to defeat the enemy. Sudama was different. He was not a Kshatriya. He was a Brahmana. And he was a very poor Brahmana. So the response of the Lord, therefore, is different according to the need. The Lord did not expect him to fight in a battle or do anything like that. But he was suffering materially. So therefore, the Lord responded to that quite immediately. In the case of the Pandavas, yes, they got everything taken away at one point. But their nature is a little bit different again. They have a fighting spirit. They tolerate all these inconveniences. So, according to the position in the pastimes and according to their different varnas, the Lord responded differently.
But in terms of relationship, Sudama only had a friendship with Krishna. In the Bhagavatam doesn't discuss about his wife with devotees or not devotees of Krishna. In fact,
well, we can assume that his wife and children must have been devotional since he was a Brahmana and he was a devotee of the Lord, and his wife also knew about Krishna, and she's the one who said, well, you have Krishna there, and Dwaraka is your friend, why don't you go and get something from him? So, to some degree, she was a devotee, maybe not the highest devotee, because she was asking the Lord for something material. Nevertheless, she was also a devotee. All of the persons involved in Krishna's pastimes here we can accept as being special devotees.
But sometimes chanting, we request for services to the Lord. We request service to the Lord. But service also, the Lord also reciprocates with some services. But sometimes the devotee may feel that he is not qualified or not able to do the service of God. What the devotee should do?
Well, ultimately, nobody is qualified. No one can do anything perfectly in this world, and nobody has the purest bhakti at this stage. Okay? But we make attempts, and just as in deity worship, after the worship, then it says, whatever mistakes I've made, please forgive all those mistakes, because we understand that the worship is never perfect when we make mistakes. So with any type of devotional service, it's never going to be perfect. There's going to be some fault somewhere, but we pray that the Lord will accept that, and the Lord does, because he understands we're coming out of material existence, so we can't do things perfectly. So the Lord accepts. The most important thing is our sincere endeavor in that attempt, that's all. And then we leave the rest up to Krishna, whether we succeed or fail or it's got fault or whatever. We don't give so much importance to that, but we make an offering to the Supreme Lord, and he generally accepts it.